So, Rabi Afram.
So, my name is Rabi Afram, and I'm a senior QA analyst and a dev manager at King. And if you don't know what King is, it's a mobile games company, probably the biggest in the world, and it's currently owned by Activision Blizzard. This presentation will be like my journey from before the school to the school, and then through the various companies that I worked in. And I've gathered 5 lessons that I think everyone should know before they head in the game industry. I will also talk about my work on Candy Crush Saga and how we do the release process there. That's very unique. So, besides my name, who am I? Well, my name is Rabi Afram, and I'm 29 years old, and I'm living in Stockholm, and basically I like playing games, like everyone here. And I like all kinds of games, like tabletop games and board games as well, and I started playing them in a very early age. I attended this university from the year 2010 to the 2013, and I've been in the industry 5 years. The math doesn't really add up, but I'll explain later. So before this, I used to work as a 4-truck driver and working in warehouses. But if you go back even further, when I graduated from gymnasiet or high school, then I didn't really have any motivation to like continue studying. So what I did was move away from home, and basically my parents paid my rent for a year while I played World of Warcraft. So I was kind of lucky there, I guess. Not everyone has that freedom. But eventually I did start working, and when I finally did decide, like I really do want to pursue like some type of academic career, then I started looking for maybe something with computers, I guess. And then I didn't know you could study to become a game designer or like game developer. So I just stumbled upon this school online, and I'll say, fuck it, I'll apply and see what happens. And I like the one thing that feels unreal for me is like back in the game developers were like basically engineers who just started making games. So I didn't know like I had to become an engineer. I thought I have to like 20 years later maybe I can be a game designer. So Gotland then. So before I moved here, I've never been to Visby, and I did like the brilliant idea to go here a couple of days before it started to like get to know the city without a TV or computer or anything. So like that was a great idea, but I was really excited for my classes to start then. And it was very exciting to like start making my first game in like the first programming lessons and stuff like that. And eventually like a couple of people dropped off, and I'm sure you all know this but now, but lesson 1, there's a difference between playing games and making games. And you know, everyone here likes playing games, but in the industry, it's going to be a job. Here you get to dip your feet in everything, like you get to try everything as an artist or everything as a programmer. In the industry, especially in the big companies, they're looking for specialists. If you get hired to model rocks, you will probably model rocks a lot. You will eventually like get to do different things during your job, but remember that you're there to do a job, a specific job. So yeah, back to Gotland then. I had a lot of fun when I was here, but the one thing that I did want was a job when I left. And to do that, I wanted to stand out. I know how competitive the industry is, so I wanted to stand out. And what I did was attend a lot of game jams, not just here in the mocap studio, but I went to like Denmark and Stockholm and other places around Scandinavia, because I think you learn probably as much as you can in an entire course in a game jam, and you make a lot of connections that way as well. And you should spend a lot of your time making those connections. Like this school isn't just about like learning art and programming and design. Oops. It's also about like the people sitting next to you, like Robin said, it's the people who are going to get you jobs. I've managed to get several of my classmates to work for King since I've started there. And even like a third of everyone that gets to join King is from a referral from an existing employee. And when your friends go out and like work in indie studios, that's especially true because they will look within their own circles before they start public applications, stuff like that. So next lesson is you get as much of this education you put into it. Like the majority of what you achieve during your time here shouldn't be done in lecture halls or classrooms. You should do it on your free time, basically. Not just like game jams, like talk to people in the industry, like me and Robin and everyone else who comes here. But like Robin said, do it in the okay manner. And like when I was in your place, by talking to guest lecturers, I landed 2 internships before I left Gotland. And that set me out a lot from the rest of the competition, so to speak. And I can say, like, this education is good, but after your first job, then it doesn't matter anymore. What they're looking is what your experience is. The title of what you achieve here doesn't matter anything. So about those internships I talked about, the first one was for a company called Meow Entertainment. It was started here by a former student, and the office was here in Visby. I don't know if the office is still around or no. Okay, but he was like a guest lecturer, just like I am today. And after the end of his presentation, he said that he was looking for one level design intern. So, like everyone else, I applied for that position, and then I talked to a classmate of mine who has also applied, and we came up with a weird idea that we're going to go to the interview together. So we did that and said, instead of one, you're getting 2 as a team, and he liked that a lot, so we got the position. The second one was for Fatshark. You've probably been to their lectures before, and they're famous for this game, Vermintide, and I didn't work on that game, so I can't talk about it. But what I can talk about is these games. I worked on all of these games: War of the Roses, Hamilton's Great Adventure, War of the Vikings, Escape Dead Island, and Krater. I did a lot of different games on a lot of different platforms as well. I had like PC, Mac, Xbox, PlayStation 3, NVIDIA Shield prototype when I worked there, so I got tons of experience when I was there. And if you don't, the game I worked mostly on was War of the Vikings when it was coming out. And if you don't know what that game is, it's kind of like Mountain Blade or like the newer game For Honor. One thing that this felt like a real job when I had it, because I had to do it full time as well as study here for my last semester. But one thing that I really liked was the group projects we had here on Gotland. Kind of really represented a slice of what it is to be in the industry, with like the stand-up meetings, the sprint planning and stuff like that. Like that is how most companies work, and I felt like prepared almost. And as I was hired as a QA intern, and like one thing that surprised me was like I've heard horror stories from the industry, but I was like treated really well. Like they appreciate my feedback and input. And it was like nothing like the horror stories I've heard. Every Friday when we worked on War of the Vikings, we used to have like a 45-minute match where everyone faced off against each other, like a multiplayer game. And after that, we used to have a meeting where we like discussed what was the thing that kept you from having more fun, basically. And we voted on the topic we believed to be the most impactful, and then we would fix it to the next Friday. And as a QA intern, several of my ideas were like upvoted to be fixed, and I felt like I had a real impact on the game. From the beginning example, you couldn't attack while falling, making it a disadvantage to be on high ground. But then we added a falling attack. Sure, there was some like overtime sometimes, but like my boss always paid for my dinner, and like I felt good to be at work, basically. And the experience you have can differ a lot depending on which company you end up in. Like I think big companies maybe have, I wouldn't say worse culture, but it's more strict culture. There's a bit more of hierarchy in there. And the indie studios, they come with their own headache and freedom as well. One thing I want to push forward though is that I was hired as a QA intern. And I spent most of my time testing and not like affecting the game in any major way. So this is probably a really important lesson, but focus on your job. If you are hired as a QA person, then you're hired as a QA person. Don't treat it as a stepping stone to becoming that designer. People will notice if you treat it like a stepping stone. When you do your job great, then you will get the chance to do other things later. This was actually something that a developer, pretty much basically on the first day when I started there, told me. And I don't know if they've had trouble in the past with other interns, but still today, whenever I get a new job or a new position, I always think about this. And at King, it really shows. One of our level designers right now used to work in the reception. She did a really good job. She applied, and she got the position. And yeah, so that was my time at Fatshark. And like toward the end of my internship, I like spiced up my CV a bit to try to make me more approachable by other people. And just a note, if you don't have a LinkedIn, get a LinkedIn. So I was unemployed for only a month after Fatshark, and then I got hired by NetEnt to do a job as a game test engineer. And if you don't know NetEnt, it's a casino company. And like I didn't really think like this was, for me, I treated it almost as a stepping stone before I started there, because I know that this isn't the real industry. I want to get to the real industry. And that's a mistake, because when I started there, I met suddenly all these cool people who used to work at DICE and Fatshark and other big companies, just basically gaming people who just wanted to go home at 5 instead of crunch. So I can say NetEnt makes a shit ton of games. They have over 100 games hosted on 170 different sites. And you know those, does anyone watch TV here in here still? If you watch TV, you see annoying casino commercials all the time, basically. And all of those games are NetEnt games. So my job was to take part in the development from start to finish. And if we did a game based on South Park or Aliens, we used to like watch the movies during pre-production to get inspired and stuff like that. And what I would do was like writing test cases and automated tests and double check and triple check everything, because when money is involved, nothing can go wrong. If something did go wrong, NetEnt usually used to pay the customer like in pocket to cover. Like one of the biggest bugs we had, I think, not in my game, unfortunately, was that every time you won a jackpot, you saw a dollar sign instead of the currency you were using. So if you play in crowns and won 10,000 crowns, it would show a dollar sign instead. And then when people checked their bank account, they were mad because it wasn't that much that they were promised. So what NetEnt did was pay out of pocket to all the people during that week who won jackpot. And like I said, there were a lot of gamers working there, and that's lesson number 4. Game is a lot broader term than you think. Games are everywhere today, and gamification is especially everywhere today. Like learning a new language is a game right now, with like apps. Like even like Coop and other ICA, they have like gaming point systems. Like so, when you start looking for a new job, broaden your vision. Don't wait for just DICE and the other AAA companies to reply to your to reply to you. Wait, like go into H&M and other app companies and stuff like that. Like anything that it's coding is a merit for you. Like it won't be weird that you have worked with apps, and if you want to work with games, like. Like you will get to your dream job eventually, and nothing that comes between that is in the way. It's a stepping stone, and you should if you do a good job, you will get great opportunities everywhere. And you might like where you end up. Maybe you like working for this app company with all these cool people. So when I worked at NetEnt, it was ranked as the number 18th place best to work in Sweden. And then I was called up by a recruiter from the number 1 company, and I was King, and that's how I ended up at King. Later I also found out you have to pay to be on that list, so it didn't feel like genius afterwards. But So I worked at King for about 3 years now, and during that time, I've always worked on Candy Crush Saga. Excuse me. So Candy Crush is the biggest mobile game in the world, basically. And it was released over 5 years ago, and it's still active today. Millions of players still play it every day. And my title there is QA analyst / dev manager. And I split my time about 70-30 with the majority on QA. And when you talk about QA at King, or QA in general, you usually talk about quality assurance. But at King, it's called quality assistance. And what that little difference means that I don't test your stuff like what the developers do. I get them to test it themselves. Quality is owned by everyone at King, from producer to QA. It doesn't matter. I bring like testing expertise to the team, but I get the team to test everything together with myself. My job is basically flagging risk during design. I'm the one in the meeting saying, "Nah, that won't work." So I'm like the negative voice in the room. And what I also do is like facilitate, like, so that all 100 people that work on Candy Crush get together once a week to sit and test the game. And I even make the producers, I give them a device and say, test the game. And when I do test the game, I usually focus more on exploratory testing, trying to break features between the teams that they do. So the way we work in Candy is like anywhere else I worked. Even though it were released 5 years ago, it's also a game that's never finished. We release a new version of Candy Crush every 2 weeks. So when we're done with one release, we basically start with the next one. And we manage this by having, like I said, 100 people, and we divide them into 10 teams, and every team gets to focus on a different part of the game, or a mission, as we call it. My team's mission is progression enhancers, and we then want people to try to play the regular levels as fast as possible, or as much as possible. And when we have something we want to put in the game, every team joins up, picks one person from every team, and those 10 people will be the release team then. It's those people's responsibility to make sure that the game goes out as fast as possible. The virtual team that's called the release team, they can delegate tasks to their own team if we found bugs and stuff like that during that process. But they're still responsible for it. When the release team is done, they go into a retro to try to figure out any learnings they can for the next team, and then they dissolve. Something that's always in the release are 15 new levels that we release. And right now, we're at around 3,000 levels in the game. And we try to get features that affect both the regular gameplay to keep it fresh and the meta layer of the game. And these 3,000 levels doesn't just sit there. We monitor them all the time and change them and even replace them altogether if they're not fun or if the difficulty is not good enough. Too easy, too hard, we try to keep it at a good level. So every team works in a different way and is free to work as they want, but one thing that is almost exact same is the setup. So we have one producer, one agile coach, one QA, one business analyst, or like a money person, 2 artists, and 4 developers. That's basically the setup of most teams. And in our team, like a lot of teams work with Scrum, but not my team. We don't even work in sprints. We just work. And we don't have a backlog or anything. We work on one feature, and when that's almost done, we just plan a new feature. We also don't care if it's done super fast. We do more people on less things. That's our motto. So in detail, like when we want to start something new, usually our producer has synced up with a lot of producers, a lot of other game producers and stuff like that. Because when we go into designing a new feature, we want to go in with a fresh mind and have all the latest learnings. And then we decide if we want to do just regular brainstorming around it with post-it notes, or something, a design session called Crazy 8. And if you don't know what Crazy 8 is, I'm not sure if you've been taught that, I can talk about it later during Q&A. So after we have some idea, 2 or 3 people take charge of that idea, because usually it's very high level. And they make like a pitch for the rest of the team. And when they've done that, if the team likes it, then we make that into an MVP, like the most small slice that still can give us the essence of what that feature is. And then we create tasks from that. We usually polish the feature also after the release of it. And everything we do except the design meeting is done standing up. So it's we don't do long meetings in my team. If we want to decide something, let's do it standing up so it doesn't run out of time. And I can say, this way of developing is maybe not suited for everyone, and maybe not even suited for everyone in King. It has its ups and downs. On the plus side, since we don't have a backlog when we go into planning, we have a fresh mind, we have all the latest learnings. And like usually when you work in a game that's updated so many times, usually if you have a backlog, by the time you come to something you want to work with, another team has done it, or learnings have found that that area of the game is not worth exploring. Since we are also more people and less things, our production in our team doesn't stagnate when someone is on vacation or gets sick. We don't get spread thin then. And on the negative side, when you don't have a backlog, like it's hard to develop new features with future features in mind. You can try to make it modular, but sometimes you have to refactor, redo entire other features because you didn't plan that the UI should have more buttons, so now you have to do the new UI over again. So even though we make slices and we try to get as many learnings as possible before we do something, we have a lot of tools to secure the quality of a feature. We can ask other teams to play our feature. We can send it out. We have deals with other companies that have hundreds of players from different parts of the world trying to play our game with recording devices and stuff like that, so we can see how they react to it. And it's up to us. Every team owns their feature. It's up to us how we want to secure that quality, that it's actually good, that it's actually fun. So when we're done with that, and we know we want to release this, we put that into the next release. Like there's a free release branch that we can merge our stuff into. And we also own it all the way out and make sure that it goes smoothly out, support the release team. And even if we believe our feature is like this will add so much value to the game, it will be a lot more fun, we always add a kill switch to it so we can remotely turn it off if something goes wrong. And since we have so many players playing the game, like a couple of tens and millions of people every day, during the year it's maybe between 300 and 400 million people that play Candy Crush. We always do an A/B test on our feature, meaning that maybe only 20% of the players get this new feature. Then we can monitor the difference in activity between the people that doesn't have it and the people that do have it. And sometimes when we think this is the great feature, the data shows otherwise. People play less, they spend less time in the game, and that equals less money. So that brings me to my final lesson. You are not your customer. And Robin also talked about this, but unless this game is just for you, you need to get outside criticism and feedback as soon as possible. And you need to create an experience that others will like. Maybe you don't love it, but others will. There are, of course, exceptions to this rule, but it's a lot riskier than to try to make the next Minecraft. Just do it if you love it. When you get feedback on your game, don't defend it. You won't be able to explain to customers why it's fun or how you're supposed to play it when it's out. But also, you need to get relevant feedback. I wouldn't expect a person who likes multiplayer shooters to like Candy Crush. So figure out who you're selling to and get feedback from that type of people. So I want to round this up by saying that I love making games, and the positive outweigh all the horror stories you've heard. And I was like also scared when a big company like Activision, Blizzard bought King and stuff like that, but nothing has changed for me except like more beta keys in my inbox. And some honorable mentions when it comes to Legends, like kill your darlings, all of them. If your core gameplay isn't fun at all, maybe it's not worth trying to tweak it and stuff like that. It's better to start over and do something else. And focus on that. Don't focus on meta layers when you're doing a game. What is the basic? What will the player do during the most of their time? Focus on that. Next is give feedback, and this is towards each other, not just for the games. A well-functioning team is unstoppable. A team that doesn't dare to say what they think to each other won't work in the end. They are very, very slow and will dance around the subject all the time. No one will give you a job. It's probably harsh, but you need to stand out. You need to be proactive if you want a job after graduation. And lastly, don't give up. It's worth it when you finally get to where you want to be. So, questions?
Thank you very much for these insights into King. As you said, your job in QA is not quality assurance, but quality assistance.
Yeah.
Now, to link that towards a more recent topic, how did, for example, the most recent loot box controversies that we have seen going around the gaming industry and also from a legal side impact the way you approach gameplay and quality assurance in that regard? Did that change anything at all, or
just a tiny detail, basically, that we want to be extra clear to the players what they get when they do something. We never want to deceive our players. If there's a 10% chance you will get something, then it should be stated 10% chance. Loot boxes have a tendency to obscure it, the rates of what you get when you open them. So yeah, a bit more caution of how much information we should give to the players. Like we want to give more information.
Could you tell us about the Crazy 8 thing?
Yeah, sure. So a Crazy 8 design session is basically that you take the team or the people who want to develop a feature and you get them in a room and everyone gets a piece of paper that they fold into 8 squares. What you do then is several rounds of just as many ideas as you can in these 8 boxes, or maximum 8 ideas, and then you share them with everyone else. And then when it's the next round, you feel free to steal ideas from everyone else to make your idea even better. And then in the end, the more rounds you do, the more similar all these ideas will be, until finally they're quite similar, so you just pick one to go with. That's basically how Crazy 8 works. Anyone else?
You were talking about the spicing of the resume and
Yeah, okay.
You were talking earlier about spicing up your resume and making yourself more appealing to a company. Could you maybe go into maybe what you did or what you've seen others do?
Just like, if it's illegal, don't do it. But if you did an internship for a weekend during somewhere, when you put in the link to LinkedIn, just enter the month you did it, and it looked a lot more appealing. So basically, small stuff like that, and like don't be afraid to like boast about your accomplishments, basically.
Hi. You mentioned that 1 out of 10 people is a business analyst, or 1 in every 10 man. How involved are those in sort of the design process? I mean, how does that role work, so to say?
We don't have any designers. Like we have level designers and some higher up designers at King, but in the teams we don't have a designer. Everyone does design in the teams at King. So even the business people get to help out during design. But what they're mainly there to do is create the knowledge for us. They're the ones who set up the A/B test system and extract what knowledge we want. How does this affect like how many game rounds the players do per day or stuff like that? So they analyze our features together with them, and they're integrated in the team to create the ownership like together with the team. So the entire team gets interested in the business side.
Hello. Would you say it's important to gain as much QA experience as you can before going further into the field?
Do you mean other fields or the QA field?
Other fields like programming or art.
Just have quality in mind whatever you do. Don't expect someone else to make sure that your job is good. It doesn't matter if it's art or programming or producing or design. You need to have the customer perspective on everything you do, basically. So you don't need to be a QA to be something else, but I think it helps to have the QA mindset when you do everything.
You mentioned a few times that King is the best in mobile gaming. So my question is related to that. Have you done any psychological or neurological analysis into addiction so as to maximize the amount of time a player spends on the game?
No, we don't have that.
And a follow-up question.
Yeah, sure.
Then how did you manage that, in your opinion?
Like I said, we do small to everything with, even if just changing a color of a button, we don't give that out to 100% of the players. So we can look at or monitor the effect it has on the game. Something small is just like having high resolution candies in the game has small impacts on the game. And if it's negative, we turn it off and don't use it. So we tweak the game with caution. That's how we get to like almost perfection. And no, okay, we're done.